Let's get more analysis as well as reaction now to the minister's briefing with the spokesperson of the South African Union of Students, Asive Dlanjwa. Asive, thank you so much for taking your time out to talk to us about this saga. I know you were attentively listening to that briefing by the minister as well. So in a nutshell, I mean, does this update given by the minister settle some of your concerns on the student payments as well as issues at NSFAS?
Good afternoon to you and also to your viewers and your listeners, and thank you for having us. The statement by the minister, for the most part, for us is a vindication because of all the things the minister bemoaned as precursors or predications that led to him having to dissolve the board are things that we had bemoaned for the longest of times. We had besought to bring the minister and the entire leadership of DHET into confidence that this was the plight and these were the challenges at NSFAS. So we are happy that the minister has come to the same conclusion, which we had for long spoken about. So it is a vindication for ourselves, but more than we're interested in being vindicated, we are interested in preserving and restoring stability at the scheme. And to that extent, we welcome the appointment of the administrator with mixed feelings, and for a few reasons. The first one is that historically, the appointment of administrators in public institutions, and in particular NSFAS, they did not bear results. Sometimes they even worsened the situation, so that we have a reservation that we don't think it's necessarily the best and the most creative way to be able to bring about stability at NSFAS 1. 2, obviously we must, we welcome the intervention. 2, what will remain at NSFAS, even though that the board will be gone, is a whole cocktail of some of the most useless and inept people that have ever graced the world who work at NSFAS. They will be there, and we believe that, as they have done before, they might seek to undermine the interventions of the administrator.
All right. And then, I mean, the dissolution of the board as well as placing the scheme under total administration. What do you think are the most likely ramifications of this? Now, I spoke to SASCO during the course of the week, and they said that they did welcome the dissolution of the board, but this will not address their issues, and we're in fact calling for a total ban of the said service providers that disperse the funds to students, and said they'd prefer the funds back at university. So what is your take in this regard, Asive?
SASCO is correct that the dissolution of the board in itself is not going to be a silver bullet or a magic pill to restore order at NSFAS. They are again correct to state that there needs to be a complete overhaul of the scheme generally. NSFAS, as we speak, for instance, you do not have a CEO, you do not have a CFO, you do not have a CIO, all critical posts in terms of the running and the day-to-day work of the scheme. So those things will still remain, that prevalence still remains, the incompetency of workers still remains at NSFAS, a list of some workers at NSFAS. And then they are again correct to point out the issue of the service providers. We thought the minister would speak to that today because the minister and the NSFAS have been communicating to the public that from April they are going to use these illegally and appointed and incompetent service providers that SASCO has been marching against, that they are going to bring them to disperse the funds. And yet they have sent yesterday communication to institutions telling them a different story. So there's no clarity as to what that means. However, we would welcome a situation, as we have been calling consistently, that these illegally appointed and incompetent service providers must be expelled, they must be removed, they do not possess the requisite capacity, and if anything, they are plunging the sector into a complete state of chaos. Therefore, on that, we would have hoped the minister will speak to that, but I believe that he said the administrator will speak to that when he eventually holds his press briefing, but they need to be removed, and that is an unqualified demand from ourselves. And then taking the allowances back to institutions, it could, for the time being, provide some level of relief, although we still do not believe that is still the most sustainable way to be able to disperse these allowances.
Most of concern, Asive, I mean, does this not mean then that the minister typically enters into a shareholders compact in that he's now obligated to assess the performance of any board and take any necessary action in regards?
Sorry, can you please repeat that again?
Yes, I'm saying basically, doesn't this mean that the minister typically now enters into a shareholders compact in that he's obligated to now assess the performance of the board as well as take necessary action in regards to whatever decisions that the new board might take?
Yes, first as it pertains to a new board, so we think as the shareholder, as the chief shareholder of the scheme, this is why obviously he would have taken the decision, he would have assessed, and based on his assessment would have come to the same conclusion that we came to long time ago, and would have taken the decision which we long proposed on the 2nd of September. That's fine. But as it pertains to a new board, we don't appreciate that there shall be a new board in NSFAS, at least not probably within the next 6 months or so. In fact, for as long as the administrator is there, which the minister announced that is appointed for 12 months with the possibility of renewing that for another 12 months, there will not necessarily be a new board at NSFAS. But when that time comes, what matters is that before the minister must seeks to assess the competency of the board in its current work, the minister should have in the very first place ensured that he had appointed some of the most credible people into that board. That board was filled with some of the highest level of mediocrity that we have ever seen. It is no wonder the board failed. The board was expected to fail. The only logical conclusion for this board was to fail because it was riddled with some of the most incompetent and corrupt people. So in redoing and in learning from this, we are appealing to the minister that in future, much like he has done with the administrator, appoint some credible and competent people to the board so that we do not find ourselves in this deja vu vicious cycle where you appoint a board for 2 years, you dissolve, you appoint an administrator, then after a year you appoint another incompetent board, then you bring in a useless CEO. So we must, to get rid of that vicious cycle, we must ensure that at every given point in time, the minister must ensure that he appoints the most competent people to those positions of responsibility.
Asive, thank you so much for that. That is Asive Dlanjwa, the spokesperson for the South African Union of Students.